Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to look at another collaboration beer, and this is one that I'm really interested in and I think it will be really pretty nice actually. So this one is half Japanese and half American, and you've seen me review beers from both of these breweries on the channel before. The Japanese brewery are one of my favourite Japanese craft breweries, and the American brewery are the one who really... this brewery is the one who really introduced me to Chicago craft beer actually, and we all know how good a craft beer city Chicago is these days. So for the Japanese side of things then, which is the home brewery, we're going to go to Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture once again, which is a little bit to the northwest of Tokyo, and we're having a look at a collaboration beer that they've done with Pipeworks Brewing Company, who come from Chicago over in Illinois in America. This particular beer is called the UFO, the Unidentified Fermented Object. It's an Imperial milk stout coming in at 9% ABV. They've added raspberries and blueberries to it, along with Achira Ethiopian coffee beans from Trunk Coffee, one of the big coffee roasteries here in Japan. So this beer, I believe, was released as a prototype earlier in 2019, but it was released in bottle around the very late November, early December from what I remember. But really cool to see these two breweries collaborate. As I say, Pipeworks were my introduction to Chicago craft beer, thanks to Jesse Holden, one of my long-term followers over in Chicago. He sent me the Ninja versus Unicorn and things like that. You know, some of their early beers. Lizard King, I remember, was another one as well. Those were really interesting beers. But Pipeworks, of course, have expanded a hell of a lot since then, and Shiga Kogen, Tamamura Honten, they were one of the first craft breweries that I discovered when I came over here to Japan for the first time. So, as I say, very cool to see these guys collaborate, and hopefully this means that Shiga Kogen are actually going to get out there a little bit more, because the beers that these guys are producing, in my opinion, are as good as some of the things that you'll find in the likes of Scandinavia or over in other places in Europe, and of course in America as well. The Shiga Kogen beers really could stand up against some of the American things and the European things and do pretty damn well in my opinion. So yeah, a really interesting beer style as well. I'm a huge fan of coffee stouts these days. That was Dugas Brewery in Sweden that really kind of got me into the coffee stout a little bit more, and I'm really curious to see how it comes out with these raspberries and blueberries added to it as well, these homegrown Japanese raspberries and blueberries. So we'll just need to see how we get on with this one. This is another beer that was brought from liquor shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Yamaichi here in Osaka. You can go along to the shop and visit Koji and Rika, both very nice, father and daughter, and they run the shop. They've got some awesome Japanese beers in there, as well as some nice ones from America, Germany, Belgium and other places that you're not going to find. So it's a real treasure trove of that. Make sure you go and check it out if you find yourself in Osaka. I'll put the link to their Facebook page in the video description below. But really excited for this one, as I said, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Tamamura Honten and their Shiga Kogen beer range before, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Pipeworks. It's been a good while actually since I reviewed one of their beers. I think the last one was around 2017 or something like that, and that was a collaboration beer, I think, with either Bräckeriet from Sweden or Amar Bryghus in Copenhagen. But there's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for the Japanese beers that I've reviewed for you, and one for all the American beers. Both of those lists are being added to whenever I get the opportunity, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen beer first, since they are the home brewery in this case. So Tamamura Honten, as I've mentioned to you before, are based in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture, which is about a couple of 100 kilometers to the northwest of Tokyo, and this area is particularly well known for its ski slopes and hot springs. This is the Tohoku region of Japan. So the Tamamura Honten company began brewing sake in 1805, and they recently began brewing beer using the name Shiga Kogen beer, which literally translates translates into English as the Shiga Heights or Shiga Mountain beer basically, and they started brewing their beers in 1998. They also produce some wines as well actually, but this is quite a common story for craft breweries in Japan. A number of them have started out of sake breweries wanting to try, you know, something a little bit different, and as a result of that, some of the beers can be very interesting because they'll use a few sake brewing techniques in the beers as well. And you know, the fermentation process that goes on in sake is actually very, very similar to what happens in beer actually, so you can get some really interesting beers as a result of that, like I said. But the head brewer at Shiga Kogen Beer is Sato Ego. He joined the company back in 2003, and the idea to brew beer came when the number of skiers visiting the resort really began to dwindle, so their business was struggling a little bit. And so in May of 2004 they applied for their brewing license. They received it 4 months later, and they bought their brewing equipment and trained for a week at a brewery in Kyushu before beginning their own commercial activities. And they only had a consultant helping them for about a week before they actually got the brewery kind of up and running, but I believe they had done a few little brewing experiments between 1998 and opening up the brewery officially in 2004. But Tamamura Honten produced their own hops. I believe it's the Shinzo Wazi hop. They've got their own variety. It was originally used as a bittering hop, but then they started using it for aroma hops as well. They produced their own sake rice, their own buckwheat, and their own blueberries as well, and I'm guessing that the raspberries is a fairly new addition to that as well. But yeah, as I say, they do their own hops, and they also have 2 tasting rooms as well, which they call the Tepper rooms. There's one at the brewery itself, and there's also the one at the Shiga Kogen Ichinose Hotel Chalet Shiga, and the bottle artwork that they have on all of their beers is designed by Tanaka Noriyuki, and it's very distinctive actually. This label is a little bit different compared to some of the other ones that you're going to find on the Shiga Kogen beers. Most of the beers I've reviewed from these guys recently have actually been like special and one-off beers. I need to go back and review another couple of their core beers because they've got the House IPA and the Porter and stuff like that. I've not really reviewed many of them. You know, when I come to Japan, I just pick up the kind of unusual ones because I know how good this brewery is, but I will try and review a few of the core things for you at some point in the future. But like I said, these guys are a very, very good brewery. Started kind of experimenting a little bit with after the alcohol laws were liberalised in the mid-90s, just took it, didn't take it all that seriously in the beginning, but then in the early 2000s they really got going and have made a hell of a name for themselves. Like I say, these guys, the beers that they're producing are really top class. If you could get the chance to try the Takashi Imperial Stout, that's really very nice. The Sonoju is a lovely West Coast IPA, and they've got a few other IPAs that have come out since then as well. The House IPA is a really nice solid one too, so definitely a brewery that you want to check out if you find yourself interested in Japanese craft beer. So yeah, that's all you need to know about Shiga Kogen Beer and Tamamura Honten for the moment. Hopefully I can review one of their sakes at some point in the future, but check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and of course you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to see all the different things that they've done. So anyway, on to the American side of things, the Chicago end. Pipeworks Brewing Company. So as I told you at the start of the video, Pipeworks Brewing Company are based in Chicago in Illinois, and they were founded back in 2012 by BJ Olson and Garrett Lewis. So the two men were home brewers, and they met when they worked together at West Lakeview Liquors in Chicago, and later they were educated in larger scale brewing by Brouwerij de Struys in Oostleuteren in Belgium, which is quite it's a very good brewery, that one actually. I still need to review something from them on the channel, but special beer coming in the future. But in 2011 they launched a Kickstarter campaign to raise the $30,000 that they needed to fund their own brewery, and this was founded in the Bucktown district of Chicago. But in January of 2013 they won the Rate Beer Award for the Best New Brewery of 2012, which is quite a feat when you consider how many breweries that there are, firstly in America and then in the rest of the world. And as of 2015 they opened up a second brewery on West McLean Avenue, which is where all of their production today takes place. They also introduced their beers in cans soon after going there, and they retained their original brewery for a period of time to brew the sour beers, but this site has now been sold off, and apparently they're going to build apartments and things on it as well. But as of December 2019, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced just under 450 different types of beer. So yeah, a really, really good brewery, this one. The first beer that I tried from these guys was the Blood of the Unicorn. I believe that Jesse also sent me, was it Lizard King, and also was it Ninja versus Unicorn, but the Blood of the Unicorn was an Imperial Red, and that's a style that I really, really love actually. You don't get to review too many of those, but it's a style that I absolutely adore, and I was very lucky. It was quite funny actually. Jesse sent me those beers, and then about a month or two after I reviewed them, I think I hadn't published the last of them yet, they actually started appearing in Copenhagen, which was just kind of, you know, sod's law actually. It's just that always kind of happens when you discover a new brewery, if you like. But yeah, a very well respected Chicago craft brewery. There's loads of them. I think there's, I'm sure Jesse told me that there's somewhere in the region of 150 breweries in the kind of greater Chicago area, if you like. So it's a city that's definitely worth visiting if you're into your craft beer. And you know, I had a good experience when I went there with Jesse before. I need to get back over there and, you know, travel around a little bit more and, you know, visit some of the Michigan breweries and some of the other Chicago ones. There's a few good breweries in Wisconsin as well, from what I gather. So yeah, that's definitely a place I need to revisit in America at some point soon. But the next one on the list, as I said to you, is New England, for my friend's wedding and things like that. So more videos to come from America at some point soon. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about Pipeworks Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more, of course, again, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to see all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself then. So like I said to you, this one is a 9% Imperial Milk Stout. It's brewed with Ethiopian Achira coffee beans from Trunk Coffee here in Japan, and it uses homegrown blueberries and raspberries from the Shiga Kogen or Tamamura Honten farm, if you like. So yeah, really nicely presented beer, this one, I have to say. The artwork on that is absolutely lovely. Really, really nice. The unidentified fermented object. The reason that the beer was apparently called that was because, you know, he just really didn't know. Sato Eigo really just didn't know what to call this beer. He didn't really know about what to call it, so he just thought UFO was quite a good name for it. On the back there, you can see the two brewery symbols. I'm just checking on the camera that you can see those. You can see the Tamamura Honten dragon there, and you can see the Pipeworks symbol as well, which is really nice. Like I said, a 9% Imperial Milk Stout brewed with Achira, Ethiopian coffee beans, and blueberries and raspberries from the Shiga Kogen farm. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. There's the bottle cap, incidentally. Forgot to let you see that. The typical bottle cap that you'll often get with the Shiga Kogen beers. So we'll get it out and into the glass. So yeah, nice little bit of smoke on the opening then, and let's get this guy out and into the glass. I do actually have another one of these big Imperial Stout beers, another collaboration that was done between Pipeworks Brewing and Shiga Kogen beer. You will see that published before the end of this little Japanese mini-series. You know, I'm in Japan fairly often, so you'll get Japanese mini-series quite often actually. So you will see the other one that was released at the same time as this, which is supposed to be, I've heard that the other one is supposed to be even better than this, but this one is supposed to be very, very nice. So yeah, as you can see and as you would expect from an Imperial Stout then, it's poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. And I've not had an Imperial Stout from Pipeworks Brewing Company, but you know, with how good their IPAs are, the chances are their Imperial Stouts are pretty good. But I know that Shiga Kogen beer, especially with that Takashi Imperial Stout, these guys know what they're doing in this style actually, so this one should be really, really nice. But in terms of its appearance, there's nothing overly surprising about this one. You've got a little bit of a kind of quarter finger of a frothy, I would say medium beige head on that one. That's just faded away to be a very, very thin foamy layer. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of where that head would be, but overall it looks pretty much as you would expect from an Imperial Stout. But in terms of colour, you know, black as night, there's nothing really coming through that. It has a little tiny hint of like a Coca-Cola coloured edge to it, but I mean overall it is pretty much as you would expect. So yeah, let's take a look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this beer. Oh yeah, straight away with this one, you get, that's a really interesting aroma, very unique. Straight away the coffee beans jump out at you. First impression of the coffee is that it's quite a floral, aromatic type coffee, this one. As I discovered recently with some of the coffee beers that I've reviewed for you. As I said, Dugas Brewery in Sweden were the one that really got me into my coffee Imperial Stouts and things like this, and then I tried a coffee IPA from Overtone Brewing in Glasgow back home in Scotland, and I learned about the coffee from them that it's all about the height above sea level that it's grown at, meters, they call it mazel, meters above sea level, and if you grow the coffee above like 2,000 meters you get some really interesting fruity and aromatic qualities out of this one. So I'm guessing that this Achira coffee bean has been grown at a really quite high altitude, because it comes across as very, very floral and aromatic. But mixing in with that, you've got the sort of tartness of the kind of raspberries and a little bit of the blueberry, the more juicy blueberries just kind of mixing in with that as well. You know, raspberries are a very popular fruit in Scotland. You know, our raspberries are quite world renowned from what I gather, but I'm interested to see how the Japanese ones are, because quite often I've found with fruit in Japan it's a little bit sharper because of the volcanic soil and things, so I'm really curious to compare the Japanese raspberries to the Scottish ones a little bit. But really the juicy fruitiness that mixes in with that coffee aroma in this beer, it's lovely. It's the blueberries and the raspberries, they work very, very well together. Like I say, the raspberry is the slightly sharper one, the blueberry is the one that's a little bit more kind of juicy and sitting in the background. The blueberry almost makes the bridge between the raspberry and the coffee. You know, I would almost suspect if you tried raspberry on its own with coffee, I think it might not work, to be honest with you. But that's me kind of conjecting a little bit, putting a bit of conjecture forward. But yeah, so the coffee bean, like I said, it has got a little bit of a kind of smooth roastiness underneath it. You can really get the kind of floral qualities coming out of there as well. Other than that, in the beer, you can pick out some nice roasty black malts in there. There is an element of chocolatiness to this one. Is there some brown sugar? There's maybe at the front of the nose, you might get a little bit of a kind of brown sugary note, but it's quite a dark sort of treacly molasses sort of thing. Yeah, I would say there is a little touch of brown sugar in here, but not overly much. As I say, a little bit of black malt, a little bit of that smooth kind of coffee earthiness, and the juicy fruits in there. There's maybe something a little bit more to it, like a bit of a kind of juicy cherry or a kind of more juicy sort of figgy note to it, but really it's the added fruits that are giving you a lot of the juicy kind of fruitiness and also some of the tartness out of the beer. There's maybe a little bit of earthy hoppiness and a little bit of grassiness in there as well, but I mean, this beer, this isn't the most complex stout in terms of its aroma that I've come across. The aroma is really nice, don't get me wrong on that, but I've had stouts that there's a lot more going on in it. This one is very straight up. The coffee bean gives you such a level of complexity to it anyway. And then you've got the juicy fruits, the raspberries and the blueberries just sitting on top of that. They really dominate the aroma, but you have to kind of search for the other things that I've picked out there in this. But the aroma is very, very nice. But like I say, not the most complex aroma that you're going to come across from an Imperial Stout. The other one that I have is more of a straight up, pardon me, Imperial Stout without the fruit in it, so we'll need to see how that one turns out. But the aroma of this beer is absolutely lovely and really, really quite interesting actually. So yeah, let's just see how we get on with this one. I'm really curious to see how it turns out. So this one is the UFO, the Unidentified Fermented Object, a collaboration beer between Tamamura Honten and their Shiga Kogen beer range and the Pipeworks Brewing Company from Chicago in Illinois. An Imperial Milk Stout at 9% ABV with Achira Ethiopian coffee beans from Trunk Coffee here in Japan and raspberries and blueberries from the Shiga Kogen or Tamamura Honten farm. Let's get stuck into this. Slanja, Skål, Kampai. Right, now I'm going to say this is one of the more unusual beers I've reviewed. It's very nice. It really is a nice beer. It's a little bit quirky within that Imperial Stout category, and you know, these sort of things I really love reviewing for you on the channel. I mean, at 9%, this isn't the booziest of Imperial Stouts that you're going to come across, but for 9% alcohol, it really has a lovely smoothness to it, and it does have a good bit of body. That's the great thing about this beer. So yeah, let's try and break the flavour of this down. I mean, the first impression of this is it comes in a little bit sharp, but it's not overly sharp. The impact of this beer is it really is actually quite juicy, and it smooths out beautifully. I mean, this is one that's definitely all about how the beer develops rather than the straight up impact that it makes. But this beer, I'll say straight away, this one gets a thumbs up from me. I really like this, and I mean, I have to take my hat off to both the breweries involved here for trying something a little bit different. I've had a few Imperial stouts with raspberries and things like that, but this is the first one where they've tried to mix fruit and coffee, and it's come off really well. But both of these breweries have a good pedigree, so they're not going to put a bad beer out there. That you have to say that in fairness. So yeah, in the middle of your palate then, you can definitely feel this beer has a little bit, there is a bit of a kind of pale malty base to this one. It feels quite light. You'll get a few almost woody undertones out of this beer the further you go into the aftertaste as well. If you go to the front corners of the palate and move in a little bit, you'll feel the nice woodiness coming out of the beer, and that really forms the kind of linchpin of it. The further that you go into the aftertaste as well, you'll feel the centre of your palate dry out, and that's where you start to get the nice kind of coffee smoothness to this beer. It is a little bit roasty and toasty, but overall it really is quite, it really just is very nice and very smooth, I have to say. It's the coffeeness and the coffee qualities in this beer are very, very well done. It's one of the more subtle coffee stouts that I've had, but I don't know if that's the fruit really pushing the coffee back a little bit. That's another interesting perspective on this beer. So yeah, I really like how, I do like how that goes together. The mouthfeel on this is really interesting as well, but we'll talk about that later. So yeah, middle of your palate, you get that nice kind of roasty, toasty coffee quality out of this. There's not really... I was picking up a little bit of a kind of brown sugary and chocolatey note in the aroma. There is a little tiny bit of it in the middle of the palate. If you go to the very centre of your tongue, there's a wee teeny bit of brown sugar. That'll be kind of covering up the booziness. Like I say, 9% is not the highest Imperial or the strongest Imperial stout that you're going to come across, but as you move further out from that, there is a little touch of a brown sugar note. But like I say, it's very minimal. It's a very small part of the palate that it really is the nice kind of coffee smoothness that dominates the palate here. And the thing that's surprised about this one is that in the aroma, the coffee beans really come across as being very sort of floral and aromatic, but in the flavour there's a little bit of that, particularly towards the back and the sides of the palate, but really it just comes across as being, you know, very, very smooth. It's almost like a kind of light roast. And I have to say, I don't drink coffee at all. You know, I've only ever really had coffee when it's been in beers like this and things. I never took to coffee on its own, but in Imperial stouts, I think it works really, really well as an adjunct. But this is one of the smoother kind of coffees that I've come across, I would say. So I don't know much about the Achira bean, if that's a particularly smooth one. Let me know about that in the comments section below. But the coffee notes in this are, there's a little touch of earthiness to it, but mainly it's quite smooth and almost a little bit silky. That's what's dominating the middle of your palate here. So a very, very smooth centre of your palate with this one. It dries out just a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste, but compared to other coffee Imperial stouts, this is one of the smoother ones that I've come across. On the hoppy side of things then, back corners of your palate, there's a little bit of earthiness in there. As you come further forward along the side of the tongue, that smoothens out a little bit, but it's not too big a level of bitterness out of this beer anyway. I mean, in terms of the earthy bitterness, it's not going to blow the head off you by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, this is a lovely kind of tasting beer, this one actually. The earthiness just spreads out and becomes really smooth. You get a little touch of grassy quality around the front curve of your tongue, but the earthiness I think does spread quite far forward. There's maybe a teeny bit of a floral quality right on the front corner of your tongue, but it's very smooth earthiness and kind of nice grassiness that's in there as well. On the fruity side of things then, this is where this beer gets really interesting. One of the things I've always said is that if you add fruit into the beer, it suppresses a little bit of the IBUs, and you can really feel the raspberries and the blueberries doing that on the edge of your palate. So a lot of the green side of the hops in IPAs and stuff like this, and also in Imperial Stouts, it sort of pushes away at that and kind of subdues it a little bit. You can definitely get the nice kind of juicy blueberry notes there around the edge of the tongue, and it sort of evolves a bit more to be more raspberry-like the further you go into the aftertaste. I think the raspberries come out more around the front of the tongue, whereas the blueberries are kind of a little bit more all around the kind of edge of the palate. You can go a little bit further back and detect some of those blueberry flavours. As I always say as well, the sort of fruity esters from the hops, they come out in that little oily bubble behind the front curve of your palate too. And there's a few interesting things going on with this beer also. So yeah, for me, this beer is quite the fruity side of things. It's got a little bit of a, when you take it in, it's got a little bit of an almost like slightly cherryish sharpness to it, but that disappears quite quickly, and the oily part of the fruits really becomes a little bit more kind of figgy, if you like. It really has quite a bit of a figgy kind of presence, maybe a little bit like pruny or something like that, but really the fruity side of this beer is dominated by the raspberries and the blueberries. I think the blueberries are a little bit more kind of present in this one. The blueberries give you a little bit of juiciness. The blueberries are more juicy, and I think the raspberries actually are a little bit more kind of juicy as well. I would say that neither the blueberries or the raspberries are quite as tart as the ones that I've had from Scotland, but maybe it's just the style of beer, right enough. But come to think of it, I've had the Raspy engine from Harveston Brewery in Scotland. That had a hell of a kind of raspberry tartness to it. This one, the fruits in this complement the coffee really quite nicely. It's one of the more juicy fruity beers that you're going to come across, if that makes sense. But in terms of its flavour profile, I really like this. It's very, very smooth and drinkable. It's quite a silky beer, this overall, so this is a good point to talk about the mouthfeel. So I would say overall that this is it full-bodied? I think it's kind of bottom end of full-bodied. Yeah, let's go with that. It's the bottom end of full-bodied. Carbonation's very smooth. The mouthfeel overall, I would say, is quite silky. There's a little bit of that kind of clean thing going on with this one, because obviously in the Tohoku region there's very, very good water. Nagano is, there's a lot of good sake from Nagano, and when there's good sake, there's clean water, and you really get a little bit of that cleanliness out of this beer. The middle of your palate is lovely and smooth. It's got a little bit of dryness to it, but really, it's just a nice level. It's not heavy at all. The beer at the middle of your palate really is more smooth rather than anything else. You've got a little bit of bitterness on the back sides of the palate, some earthiness, like I said, but mainly the IBUs in this beer I think are quite low. I wouldn't be surprised if this is only, this one has to only be around 50 IBUs at most. I mean, it's quite low for an Imperial Stout. It might even be a little bit lower than that, to be honest with you. But around the front edge of the palate, you've got those lovely, more juicy, fruity notes out of it. There's a little bit of tartness to this beer, but like I say, not overly much. The blueberries and raspberries just give you a nice level of juiciness when it comes to this beer, actually. So I mean, overall, it's really, really nice. This, you've got a little touch of an oily fruit in there as well, which is kind of figgy and things, but it's a lovely, lovely beer, this, and definitely worth a look if you get the chance. I highly recommend that you have a go at this one. I've enjoyed this for you, and I'm very curious to see what the more straight up one comes out like. I think that's called the Omake, but you'll see me review that in a few videos time. So yeah, let's just leave it at that for this one. This one is the UFO, the Unidentified Fermented Object from Shiga Kogen Beer at Tamamura Honten in Yamanouchi, Nagano Prefecture, Japan, in collaboration with Pipeworks Brewing Co from Chicago in Illinois. A lovely, very smooth and also quite juicy and fruity Imperial Stout. This one, an unusual creation, but it works very well. I need to keep an eye out for that Achira coffee beer and see if it comes across as smooth in some of the others, if it comes across as smooth as it does in this one in other beers. That would be a really interesting thing. I'm a big fan of my coffee stouts, like I said, but an awesome beer and one that I recommend you try if you get the chance. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Shiga Kogen Beer and Tamamura Honten. and the Pipeworks Brewing Company, both very, very good breweries, and they've produced a really interesting collaboration beer here. Make sure you check out my social media, check out both of these breweries, check out Liquor Shop Asahiya here in Osaka as well, and I will catch you guys very soon. The Unidentified Fermented Object from Shiga Kogen Beer in Nagano in Japan, and Pipeworks Brewing Company from Chicago, Illinois, America. Slàinte, Skål, Kanpai. Make sure you check out this beer, 9% Imperial coffee stout, Imperial milk coffee stout, with blueberries and raspberries added to it. You don't get too much lactose out of it, come to think of it, but a lovely smooth beer this. Slàinte, Skål, Kanpai.